Hi, welcome to the resident track segment of Cal ACEP's AdvancED this year. I'm Xian. I'm an APD at UCSF Fresno, and I am super bummed that I don't get to hang out in San Diego this weekend, where we were supposed to be. But our team has worked really hard to bring our conference to you live this morning on Big Marker. I think that one of the mistakes I made as a resident was thinking that after I completed residency, I had made it. I was done, that I was free to run and prance around without the weight of, I don't know, a decade plus of education and training. What I didn't realize was that I was sorely mistaken on this. I wasn't free. I was simply able to finally start practicing on my own and to start my career, which I had worked for the better part of my 20s to try to get to. The end of residency was never a true end. It was simply a beginning, and one that came with its own unique set of stressors. No longer was it good enough for me to proclaim that I just wanted to be a good doctor, that I didn't want to kill anybody. I still wanted that. I still wanted to be a great physician. But in the process of trying to validate that for myself, I found myself also having to juggle the pressures of a career, of managing personal finances, of balancing work and life, happiness and satisfaction. And all of this had to happen outside of the comforting cradle of residency itself. It was very different. And I'm hopeful that in our track today, we'll be able to bring together some of these things to light and share some of those thoughts and concerns and anxieties that went through my mind. And I wonder now if others also share as well. When we thought about what it was that you, the resident, want to know about right now, today, the loudest thing in the room was, oh my God, what is going to happen to my career? COVID has changed everything. And what was the normal pressure of having to grow up has gotten a little bit more complex. So we asked our members at Cal ACEP to reflect on this and to share with you their thoughts and their ideas. And they did. Residents and attendings from all sorts of practice settings across the state tuned in to share with you the advice that they received and the advice that they want to pass on to you. As we head into our segment, I wanted to thank our track members, Stephen Lai, Daniel Odrea, Linda Herman. I wanted to thank the Cal ACEP team, MRAP, and for all the speakers who took time out of their busy schedules to help and put this together and make this happen. They're hanging out in the chat right now, so if you have any other questions, any thoughts you wanted to share, put it out there. Don't be shy. I promise you that the things that you're wondering about and have questions about, everybody else who's in here watching at the same time is also thinking the same thing. We're all in this together. Thanks.
The answer to the first part of that is absolutely yes. Hiring is much harder, I would say, right now. I wouldn't say that our group is in a hiring freeze, but certainly it is. It has slowed some. To answer that second point, the opportunities for residents have definitely changed, I think, in the time of COVID. In the past few months, ED volumes have decreased, so revenue is down, especially for fee-for-service groups. So hopefully ED volumes will continue to come back, and hiring won't be as much of an issue moving ahead. But definitely the pandemic has affected job prospects, I would say, for people.
One of the things I look for in an interview for an attending physician are those interpersonal skills. I think this is so important for an emergency physician to be able to establish rapport and trust quickly with the patient. So if we're there having an interview and we're struggling to establish rapport and get on the same page, I worry about how you will connect with the patients. So it's important to use your personality and use your interpersonal skills and not be too nervous or reserved in the interview.
I think it's the sincerity of your interest in the specific place and the job. So I think if you can answer with some specificity about why you're interested in moving to a place or working in a particular practice environment, that will give you a leg up in your job interview. I will say the one thing that I look for is not having too much extraneous information or fluff on your resume. So, pare it down, make it relevant, but just, tailor your CV to whatever job you're applying for, I would say.
My advice to new grads looking for a job this year is to cast a wide net and don't be afraid to follow up and make personal contact and self-promote a bit. Ask if there are docs on staff from your medical school or from your program and try to make connection with them. If you can establish a rotation, or even if you can go for a conference so that you can meet people, that's really valuable. Personal relationships go a long way. Unfortunately, this might be a tough job market this year because of COVID. Volumes are down and groups will be hiring fewer physicians than in normal times. However, I encourage you to be flexible, take those part-time positions, even if it's something like an all-night gig, and demonstrate your skills. You are valuable and we need you. So get in the game, show your value, and that position that you desire will open up.
This is an issue in many places. Most of the best jobs are never advertised on job boards. So I think that obviously alumni connections are really important if you can go through those networks and they can open doors for you, for people to interview you as a candidate. But I think persistence and specificity and being direct are really key.
I think it's great if people are open to different types of practices. And I feel like a lot of young doctors coming out of residency today want something that's really safe and secure and kind of no fuss, no muss, no hassle. They just want to be employed. They want to punch the clock and just put in their hours and get some benefits. And I would like to encourage you all to consider other types of practices, like, for instance, small independent democratic groups where maybe there's some sweat equity and you have to buy in. But that at a certain point, a few years in, you're going to get some ownership of the group and you'll be able to decide the direction of the group and what you want the benefits to be and how you want the retirement package to look and how you want the bonuses to be paid and how you want the employment practices to work. And I think that if you're open to that possibility, you'll actually end up with a lot more leverage, a lot more income over time, because those practices tend to be more lucrative for the owners because you're not having to pay any kind of management firm or any management structure. And I think you also feel like you have more control over your work environment, which is, I think, really good for job satisfaction and longevity. So I guess that's my biggest piece of advice. Be open to that. Make sure that you feel like it's a group where you'll be happy and like you get along with the people and you feel like they're your kind of people and the style of practice suits you, regardless of what the economic structure of the practice is. Good luck.
Hello, my name is Alfredo Urdaneta, and I'm currently a Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Army Reserve. I'm going to give you a brief lecture about military service as an option for loan repayment and financial assistance for those who have medical school and undergraduate school debt. As we all know, medical school and undergraduate school debt is a very real growing concern. Many people are straddled with debt that causes financial hardships as well as emotional hardships. There's also uncertainty about the government loan repayment options that are available and whether they will actually be able to meet their obligations. I'd like to, in this presentation, give you a brief overview of military service as an option for loan repayment and financial aid, whether you are a medical student in residency or have graduated residency. A brief history of what I have done in my military service. I began my military service as an HPSB or Health Professional Scholarship recipient for my medical school. After medical school, I was able to do a civilian residency at UCSF Fresno in emergency medicine, and then went on to do active duty to complete my active duty service obligation. While on active duty, I was able to complete a critical care fellowship at the University of Washington and was receiving both active duty pay and the associated bonuses, which was significantly greater than what I would have received if I had done the critical care fellowship as a civilian. After my active duty service obligation was completed, I decided to transition to the reserves, with one of the benefits being I'm able to transfer my GI 911 benefits, which are educational benefits, to my children after completion of a term of service in the reserves. So in general, each branch, Army, Navy, Air Force, has active duty, reserve, and guard options for loan repayment and financial aid and additional income. All of them require a minimum term of service agreement, which is dependent upon what loan repayment or financial aid you decide on. For those who are unfamiliar with active duty versus guard reserve, active duty is full-time service within your branch's service, while guard reserve is ACEP or Health Professional Scholarship recipient, retire from either the active duty or the reserves and receive both retirement benefits and the TSP benefits when you reach appropriate age. I'm much more familiar with the US Army, and so I'll be discussing some of the Army options for financial aid and loan repayment. As I mentioned earlier, I took the HPSP for medical school. This is a medical school option for those who have 1 to 4 years left in medical school and pays for your tuition, as well as providing a monthly stipend while you are in school, and then also providing a signing bonus. It does carry an active duty service obligation, which is typically a minimum of 4 years. There's also the FAP for those who are in residency, or the financial aid program, and pays $45,000 plus a $2,000 per month stipend. This also has an active duty service obligation. For those that are outside of residency and medical school, there's the active duty health professional loan repayment that allows for repayment of up to $120,000 of loan over 3 years, paid at $40,000 increments for every year of active duty. If you choose to go in the reserves also have a loan repayment program that pays up to $250,000, depending on your specialty, which is paid in $45,000 increments for every good year of service within your reserve or guard program. In addition to these loan repayment and financial aid programs, you can also get additional bonus pays, which include the accession bonus, which is specialty dependent and starts when you sign up for military service. The board certification pay, which is a special dependent annual bonus and requires board certification. Incentive pay, which is an annual bonus that requires only residency completion. And specialty pay, which is an annual bonus but requires a multi-year contract and requires only residency completion. So as you can see, there are loan repayment and financial assistance programs that are available, and it is possible to have both a loan repayment and other specialty bonus pays depending on how you arrange your contract. If you are interested in military service, I recommend that you speak with a healthcare recruiter. It is important to note that the healthcare recruiters are not physicians and may not be able to answer questions about what it is like to be an emergency physician or a physician within your branch of service. I recommend that when you begin to speak with your healthcare recruiter, that you ask to speak to someone within that branch, whether it be Army, Navy, or Air Force, in emergency medicine or physician, that can give you more insight into what active duty reserve time is like, or also be able to explain the requirements for the different bonuses and how they work. I've been very happy with my military service. I have been very lucky in my career to have served alongside some incredible people and provide service to soldiers, airmen, Marines, and sailors. I would not trade my military service for anything else. Thank you and have a good day.
Hi, everybody. I am Dr. Jennifer Kanapicki, and today I'm going to be talking to you about finances for physicians. And we're doing this all in 5 minutes, so let's get going. First, my advice is to get a book. Like medicine, We read and we educate ourselves on the topic. So we should do the same for finances if that's what's important to us. So my advice is The White Coat Investor. I love this book. It's a very easy read. It really explains things for you in a simple way, easy to understand. The author has a blog post and a Facebook page. So if you want to do a deep dive, you can. So my advice, pick up the book. Next, you probably are thinking, what can I do as a resident, right? I don't have any money. So let me tell you some of the things you can do now to really set yourself up for the future. First, save money. I know it's simple, but it's what you need to do to really make sure that your finances are set up for later in life. You're going to want to save 20% of your gross income. So look at a pay stub, figure out what your gross income is, and then just say what's 20% of it, and that's how much that you need to save. And then what I'm going to go into is, what do you do with these savings? So you have this pile of savings, and then you're going to want to put into buckets. So the first bucket you're going to want to fill is your emergency fund. So this is going to be 3 to 6 months of your usual living costs. You're going to want to invest this some way that's non-risky, because if you need it, you want to have fast access to it. So this is like your savings accounts, your checking accounts, some way that maybe it doesn't have a high return, but you can access the money really easily. The second bucket that you're going to want to do with that 20% of your savings is give to a Roth IRA. Roth IRAs are awesome. So if you do anything in residency, I would suggest a Roth IRA. Basically, you contribute to it after tax, and you're in a really low tax bracket right now, so this works out great. It grows tax-free, and then you take it out tax-free. So win, win, win. So if you don't have, the max is $6,000 for 2020, give 1,000, give 500, give anything you can, and you're really going to thank yourself for this in the future. If you have more money after you fill those two buckets, then think about paying off your student loans. So I am in the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, and this program's awesome. If you make 10 years of payments, all the rest of your loans are forgiven. Your future job needs to qualify to be in the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program kind of list of places. But here at Stanford, Stanford qualifies. And so what's really nice is in a couple of years, I'm going to get the rest of my student loans paid off. So really looking to get the rest of my student loans paid off. So really looking to this program, super beneficial. Okay, now you're a big attending and you're swimming in money. What do you do to really set yourself up, again, great for the future? This slide is how to reach FIRE. That's financial independence, retire early. So if that's something that you're interested in, my, again, biggest point is save, save, save. So you want to save 20% of your gross income. So when you get that attending paycheck, calculate 20% of your gross income, and then you're going to start wanting to put this into buckets. And so we're going to talk through some of these buckets. This is a fun slide. And so your first bucket is always going to be your emergency fund, no matter what. Again, 3 to 6 months of living expenses. God forbid if something goes wrong, you want to have access to this money. Your next bucket is the match. So my employer is really awesome. They offer a 10% match. So basically, say I made $5,000 and I give 10% of that. So I give $500. They will match me $500. So this is free money. So when you get that first job, really talk to your benefits, part of your employer, and see what do you offer. And if there's a match, do it. That's the first bucket you want to put your money into, because it's free money that you're going to get back in the end. Second bucket, after you get the match, second bucket is your high interest debt. So pay that off. Anything over 8% is high interest. So any credit cards, any like student loans that happen to be like a crazy rate, pay those off. Next, with the next kind of bucket that you want to invest in is your tax deferred retirement plan. So the max you contribute to a 401k or 403b through your employer is $19,500 in 2020. So you're going to want to fill that up. After you meet the match, fill it up until you get your max of $19,500. Some employers offer a 457. This is an additional $19,500. So again, fill these all up. These are all pre-tax. So what's so great about pre-tax is it lowers your kind of taxable income in the end. So you contribute pre-tax and then you don't take them out until you're retired. And so you should hopefully be in a lower tax bracket by that time. And that's where the savings comes from. Your next bucket is fund a health savings account. So these are great because they also lower your taxable income. So you invest in them pre-tax and then you withdraw them tax-free. So usually you have to use these for something health related. But again, when you think about your future and your retirement, these can be super beneficial. Next, after that, you're going to fund a backdoor Roth. So once you become a high income earner, the government kind of doesn't want you to contribute to a Roth outright, right? Because these are so beneficial in the end. But you can contribute to a regular IRA. And again, the max is $6,000 in 2020. But then as soon as you contribute to your IRA, you can convert it to a Roth IRA. And that's really great, again, because Roth grow tax-free, you take them out tax-free. So Roth in the end is what you want to contribute. And you can kind of have a backdoor way to do it. And you can also check out White Coat Investor to learn more about that. Next, if you have kids, funding a college savings plan is an amazing way to not only save money, but to save for your kids' future. So that's your next bucket. Then pay off moderate interest debt. So this is 4 to 8%. Like if you're paying that much in interest rate, you want to pay that off. Next bucket, save for a house. I know many of you would love to have a house eventually, and a lot of times these require 20% down payment. So you really want to save for that. And next is the more risky taxable accounts. And lastly, pay off your low interest debt. So basically, my take-home point is to save. Always have a goal of saving 20% of your gross income. And happy savings, guys. Thanks so much. Bye.
Hello, my name is Matt Underwood, and I am an attending physician at Riverside Community Hospital with the HCA University California Riverside program. And today I'm going to get a little bit vulnerable and talk about one of the biggest financial mistakes I made early on in my career. And hopefully no other residents will make the same dumb mistake. So the title of this talk is Timeshare 101, Don't Fall for It. So we're taking it back to about 1992. I was a fourth-year medical student. My wife was an intern. We both had military scholarships. We came from pretty humble backgrounds, but we really had no financial mentors. And something magically happens when you become a physician. You're probably already aware of this. You start getting unsolicited offers of life insurance and vacation packages. Well, we got a mailer in the mail about how we could get a free stay at a nice resort down in San Diego. We just had to listen to a presentation about buying a timeshare. And we weren't prepared for it. Once we got in that room, it was this high intensity sales pitch and combination of waterboarding. And unfortunately, we ended up signing on the line and buying ourselves a timeshare. They pitch it as you're going to buy this vacation for the rest of your life. You get to use it every year. You own it. You won't have to pay anymore. And you can make exchanges for your weeks around the world to all other different resorts. But shortly afterwards, I realized I'd made a mistake. So here was the cost. The purchase price was around $15,000. It was at a very high interest rate. I think it was around something like 12% back then. I realized that was a mistake shortly after, and I tried to pay it off real fast. But by the time we paid it off, it had cost us $18,500. And what you underestimate is the annual maintenance fees and real estate taxes. that I looked on the internet, and they can be like $1,000 now. But by the time we unloaded this thing, we probably paid about $3.5. And then when you try and get rid of these things, there's various exit scams that I fell for as well, where they say, give us some money up front and we're going to find a buyer. Well, I fell for that a couple times, and by the time I was into this, I was about $23,000 in the hole. Actually ended up, to get rid of it, just donated it to a charity just to unload it. And if you really want a timeshare, you can go on eBay and probably buy it for $1,000 or $2,000. So the opportunity cost lost. If I had taken that $23,000 and just simply mindlessly invested into a index mutual fund and forgot about it and not done anything with it, it would be worth about $200,000 right now. And since I'm paying for my daughter's medical school, that would come in quite handy right now. So to sum this up, you become a resident, hold on to your wallet. As hard as you have worked through medical school and spent time becoming a doctor, there are people that are trying just as hard to take your money, and they're better at it and smarter at it than you. Take time to learn about money and finances. It can be very simple, and it does not have to be complicated, or you can make it as complicated as you want. And finally, don't fall for the timeshare scam. All right, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Hi, Dr. Steve Maron, President, VEP Healthcare. Congratulations on being in your final year of your residency. You're about to graduate at the perfect time. You did 4 years of college, then 4 years of medical school, 3 or 4 years of residency, and finally you'll be able to do what you said you wanted to do when you first applied to medical school: make a difference and help other people. Now, before you rush into any job that you'll have for the next 20 years, consider doing something different. Maybe it's international work, Doctors Without Borders or another group. Maybe it's international travel, joining a group, or even going alone with a backpack. You say, well, but I've got all this debt. I got 200 or 300,000 in debt. I say, perfect. You know, if you had 30 or 50,000 in debt, you'd think you could pay it off in a couple of years, and you'd really work hard to do that. But 300,000 in debt? No way you'll pay that off in a couple of years. So just think of it as a mortgage payment that you're going to pay for the next 20 or 30 years, and don't let it bother you. Now, before you go off, you may say, I need some money. So maybe you work for a group that lets you come and go. Come in, work for a month or 2 or 3, make a bunch of money, and then take off. Whether it's go to an international opportunity like Doctors Without Borders, or whether it's travel. In 20 years from now, you'll look back and you'll either say, I got a job right out of residency and I've worked hard for the last 20 years, and I spent half a year working internationally or on an Indian reservation, and half a year with a backpack traveling throughout the world, and boy, I would never trade anything for those experiences. Congratulations.
If I could give you one piece of financial advice, it would be to live within your means that very first year out of residency. That very first year is probably the most important in terms of your financial career. The decisions that you make will last you your entire career. Lifestyle creep is very real. So if you buy a condo, you can never go back to living in an apartment. If you buy a Lexus, you're never going to want to go back to driving a Prius. Now, this is much easier said than done, because there's going to be a tremendous amount of peer pressure all around you to live the doctor lifestyle. And your natural reaction is going to be to keep up with everyone else. But if you can just resist that urge just for a few years, start paying back your loans, get your finances in order, and start saving money, you'll be far ahead of everyone else in just a few short years. Ultimately, you want to work because you want to, not because you have to support your lifestyle.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Lori Winston. I am the Vice President of Medical Education at Kauai Delta Healthcare District. I am the Director of Academic Affairs for Vituity. I'm an emergency physician, and I am the President-elect coming up for California American College of Emergency Physicians. And I am talking to you today just a little bit about your CV. I think that CVs traditionally give residents a lot of worry and angst. And honestly, I want to put it in perspective for you, because never, ever, ever has a medical director took a look at a CV and said, oh my gosh, have you seen this CV? Like, we have got to hire this person. Your CV is merely a ticket to the show where you're going to try to get a job. And so don't overthink it and don't over worry yourself about it. Just understand that it's sort of like a pass to get the ball rolling. Let's see. Things that you want to highlight in your CV. You want to make sure that the formatting is correct and that you don't end on a pronoun or a participle, that you want to make sure that you making sure that it's clear and concise and it looks like you're proud of it. You want to make sure that you also highlight the important things in your CV that are obvious, right? Where you went to med school, where you did residency, if you were chief resident, but also include things that you did during residency that show your experience. So if you participated in any patient safety initiatives, I would include that. You all probably did some kind of a quality improvement project. You need to include that. A lot of people say that anything that happened before med school isn't relevant, but I would disagree. I think that any show that you have had experience in customer service is super important. Also, I think it shows well in terms of leadership to discuss any involvement that you may have had in things like team sports or being an Eagle Scout. And so if you were a waitress at one point, you could mention it on your CV, because that does mean that you had experience in customer service and understand throughput and moving a room. Lastly, I would say that it's important to be truthful on your CV, that God forbid the medical director that's looking at you asks you a question about running and what distances you like to run, and you really have no idea, then you got to be careful saying that you're an avid runner. So just be really honest in whatever you put down. Otherwise, I hope that this is helpful and that you are encouraged to put your CV out there. Last tip I will say is, while it's okay to talk to recruiters for businesses that you are interested in becoming a part of, but I would be careful of something called a headhunter. So a headhunter is someone that is actually going to collect a fee for giving your name to them as a potential hire. And so if a medical director is looking at 2 CVs and yours comes from a headhunter, which means they need to pay $25,000 to get you, versus someone else that just cold called a medical director and provided their CV, then the odds may be against you. So be careful again about who you're giving your CV to in terms of the best ways to get a job. And in the end, know that there are no unemployed emergency physicians and that you're going to get a job. And enjoy.
Well, that was a great way to start the resident track. Thank you so much to all of our speakers. There's a few things that I want to highlight here while we have Xian with us. And if you notice, we're actually both in the same place, but we've got some physical distancing going on. And so Xian is just off in the other room where we have a second camera set up so we can do this sort of live Q&A. Hey, Xian, how's it going?
Hey, Jess.
So on the topic of job search, there was some really interesting things that got brought up. And I understand this angst that people are feeling that it's hard enough to apply for your first job out of residency, and now there's COVID. And one thing that, just to throw in my 2 cents here, one thing I just want to remind people of is that everyone is always hiring, sort of, right? So even somewhere that says we're not hiring, we have no positions, that it is still okay to reach out to them and let them know that you are interested in working for them, because things can change in an instant. And you've probably seen this in your own residency program, that all of a sudden, unexpectedly, a faculty member has a change in their life circumstances and they're gone, or maybe 2 or 3. And there's always this sort of flow going on of people coming and going. And so while it may seem like, oh, no one's hiring right now, everyone is always hiring. And if you put the word out there that you're interested, then you may be the first person to get that call when a spot becomes available, because a spot will become available. And also, if you apply to multiple jobs and you end up turning one down, don't feel like you're blacklisted from that place, that they'll never ever talk to you again because you turned down the job. No, I mean, just do it cordially, respectfully, be honest. Actually, I think opens more doors, because then they've already met you. And then if things change in your life and you want to go there a year later, they've already kind of met you. So I think that works to your advantage. Xian, I wanted to ask you a question. As someone who has moved jobs a couple of times, I know out of residency, you did locums, you did Doctors Without Borders before you joined us at UCSF Fresno. What would you say to residents who are out there who are feeling that pressure to pick the perfect job right out of residency? I know a lot of residents feel like, oh my gosh, there's so much stress. I have to find just my dream job, or then what? So what would you say to people as someone who's kind of moved around a little bit before you found your home?
I guess for me, changing jobs is totally normal. And I think that if you just know that that's going to be a thing that's going to happen, then it takes away so much more of that pressure on it. And I think that for a lot of people, that idea of that perfect job in their minds in residency is oftentimes geographic and location based. And I think that over and over I see this, and I can't seem to convince people about it otherwise. But when we make geography our like number one top priority, sometimes we end up in situations or in jobs or trying to break into areas where we might actually have a job where we're not that happy, or that we're not that well respected or not that well appreciated for what we do. And I think that a lot of times having that job that really appreciates you being there and wants to give you opportunities to let you grow and let you develop and let you kind of help to contribute with the group and let it grow by itself is a lot more engaging. I think keeps people there for a lot longer. And at least for me, I think that that consideration of that geography and that very specific area that you need to go to, unless you have a pressing need to do it, don't box yourself in that way, because I feel like sometimes that leads to frustration and actually changes of jobs for new grads.
Yeah, that's good. That's good advice for people who don't feel very geographically tied to a particular region. I want to move on to the topic of finances. There's lots of different advice that's out there. And I want to acknowledge Dr. Urdaneta and anyone else who's serving in the military and say thank you for your service. And it was really nice hearing that military perspective on finances and the benefits the military offers. So thank you for that. I think no matter who you talk to or listen to or what book you read or blog you read, you're going to get a little bit of different financial advice. And you saw some of that here. It was lots of different opinions. And you have to really think about what makes sense for you, what's right for you and for your life. For me, the big things are all about budgeting and having control over where your money is going, setting goals, both short-term and long-term. And I'm a fan of attacking the debt fast right away. I know that's one strategy, and other people say, oh, just manage it little at a time. I don't want that haunting me for decades. I want that out of my life. So I'm a fan of just attacking that fast and hopefully being done with it soon, even if it's a big number. We have a big shovel to dig our way out. So Xian, was there something in particular that stood out to you from the speakers who spoke about managing money?
I think that I'm embarrassed to say that I learned a lot from Dr. Kanapicki's lecture, and I'm not doing all of the things that she suggested even right now to this day. So if you feel overwhelmed by all that information, don't worry, you're not the only person. I think that the most digestible thing that really still rings true to me today is from Jason An over at Riverside. I think that just that lifestyle creep is really real. And as a person who's like, never thought that that could happen, and never thought that and was always going to be a dirtbag, for lack of a better word. It's a very real thing, and I see it time and time again from colleagues and peers, where when you have this sudden change in lifestyle and this financial income so quickly, when you're not careful, it just racks and racks and racks. And I think that I remember working alongside a lot of other new grads, and within 3 or 4 months out, they had a brand new truck and then a big house, and then a year afterwards, they're not working 16 shifts anymore. They're working 18 because they've entered into a cycle where they couldn't get themselves out of. And I just feel like that's something that is out of all the things that we're told, so simple and so true. And if we can just hang on for a year, for 2 years, it makes a huge difference in the entire trajectory of your career and life afterwards.
Yeah, and it's really hard to do. And I was guilty of doing the same thing, and I've had to walk it back quite a bit in the last couple of years to sort of make up for that loss, the ground that I lost early on. Fortunately, no catastrophic mistakes, but hey, we all make the mistakes and we learn from them and we move on. And I thought Lori's talk was great. Some really good pearls about your CV. And just remember that your CV is a piece of paper or it's a PDF. It's not you. It's not everything. And I think 100% of the time, the personal connections that you make, getting a mentor of yours to pick up the phone and call someone for you, finding that network and that connection is always more valuable than a piece of paper. So CV is important, but don't put too much weight on it. And always, if you have a chance at a personal connection or someone making a call for you, that's always really, really valuable. So that is about halfway through our resident track. We have a few more talks we're going to get to, and I'm going to welcome our next speaker, Dr. Charney Burk, who's a resident here with us at UCSF Fresno, and she's going to talk about a learner's feedback on teaching.
Hi, I'm Charney. I'm a third-year resident at UCSF Fresno. I'm going to be talking to you today about Are You Effective? A learner's feedback on teaching. This lecture was largely born from conversations with friends both at UCSF Fresno and around the country, talking about less than ideal educational experiences we had. And I noticed that we have a lot of shared experience, but we often don't talk about it. So the intention of this lecture is to go through some common scenarios of less than ideal educational experiences and talk about potential solutions, ways that we can partner with our attending to enhance our education. We're going to go through 3 separate scenarios: the one-way attending, the go with the flow doc, and the timeless teachers. And we're going to kind of define each of these and then talk about the potential solutions and ways we can work with our attendings. I have no disclosures or conflicts of interest to report. The first one, the one-way attending. So this can kind of be exemplified when you come in confidently to present a patient and you have a plan set up and your attending surprises you with, nope, I'm going to do something completely different. An example would be what you identified as a low-risk patient coming in with chest pain. They have a low heart score and your intention is to just do one trope and dispo them. And the attending has something very different. Often you can see that this would be a little bit of a difference of opinion in terms of, conservative or liberal managements or dispositions of patients. And what's happening here is both people are engaging in what's called overconfidence bias. And I want to remind us that overconfidence bias is not arrogance bias. It's basically just utilizing our experience or the fund of knowledge that we have to create a gestalt, a gut feeling. And instead of running through all the data in that moment, we use that gestalt to make our decision. And so we have 2 separate opinions at this point. And I think the best way to approach this is really to slow down our thought process and make it very clear how we come to our decision. So the way in terms of going back to that original case would be, I have this patient, this age, I look at her risk factors in this way, and I look at the heart score as these details, and that's why I come up with this decision. And you present that to your attending, and then you ask them to take that patient and do the same thing. So you can really identify where your thought processes divert and how you may be seeing the problem differently. It's also good to remind ourselves that sometimes this is purely based on experiences that we had, and faculty have a ton of experiences to draw from. And so asking them about, hey, did you have a chest pain patient like this that went a different way than you expected? Or talking to them about that experience can kind of increase our fund of knowledge because that's an experience that we can also absorb. So that is going to be our one-way attending. Next up, we have the go with the flow doc. And this is a doc that we can often really enjoy working with and let kind of this pattern slide by. And what I mean by this is these doctors don't really mold our plans tremendously. They make sure something's reasonable, and then they move to the next patient and let you kind of drive the movement in the department. They often have community experience and are really paying attention to the movement of the department rather than the nitty-gritty details. But I think when we reflect on this, I think we can realize that we didn't come home with like this real clear educational take-home point, or we didn't have this intellectually invigorating shift. And we're missing out because we have so much to learn from these doctors. So I recommend kind of utilizing the framing effect. If we remember, framing effect is basically based on how we view the problem, we approach the problem differently. differently. So similarly, we can utilize the framing effect by focusing this attending on our goals. So that's my recommendation, is basically at the start of our shift, talking about a goal that we have that we want to gain out of this shift. And I also think it's really valuable to kind of look to the attending strengths. You know, these attendings can be great proceduralists, or they're very good at moving patients, or they may have a fund of knowledge in a particular area, and kind of talking to them like about focusing on that particular area can really be useful, especially because I think teachers are really effective when they love the subject matter, and I think it makes it a better conversation in that point. So that's our way of approaching the go with the flow doc. The last one we have is the timeless teachers. And I do say timeless because I think sometimes they forget about the constraint of time. And what I mean by this is these are often our best teachers. They have so much knowledge to impart. They're great teachers. They're eager to do so. But sometimes we can just be overwhelmed by the amount of information coming at us. And it can be difficult to absorb all of their knowledge that they're offering. And what I think we're struggling with at this point is just cognitive overload. I think a great way that I can kind of identify that I'm struggling with this is when that teacher is teaching me something that I know I need to learn, but I find myself distracted in my mind by other tasks, or I'm trying to write a note at the same time and not giving the full attention. And I think it's because we have some conflict between other responsibilities in the department along with our educational experience. So I think it's really useful to identify that early. And that's kind of the first step. And I think it's good also to remind ourselves that cognitive overload is really going to be affected by how burnt out we are. So if this is your 6th night shift in a row, you're off the bat going to have some cognitive overload, and it's going to be hard to absorb information. So identifying that early so you can pay attention to that is really helpful. And then from there, we talk about partnering with your attending. And what I mean by that is if they're teaching you on a topic and you know it's going to be a larger conversation, you know, and you're just too distracted, just pausing and saying, this is incredible information that I really need to get back from. Let me, I have a few tasks that I need to do here. Give me a quick second. And then I want to give my full attention because I don't want to, misabsorb this information. And then I think also what's useful is because these teachers have so much knowledge and they're so good at giving us information, sometimes at the end of a shift, we're like, oh man, I learned so many different things. How do I focus my time outside? And so just bringing that up with them can be really useful. We covered a lot of topics today. What do you think I should focus on, in my studies outside? Or because they often have a lot of resources that they've utilized to get the educational level they have, we can talk to them about the resources available and what they might recommend. And that's a good way of kind of redirecting ourselves to kind of gain the most out of those conversations we had during shift. So that is our timeless teachers. And then the very last thing, which is partially in jest, but always a very good reminder, is if you're finding yourself frustrated during a lot of shifts or not having the educational experience you want, you've really got to reflect on ourselves as well. And I found this at different points in my training where I was just really burnt out, and it was hard for me to find, positive educational experiences and shifts in those periods. So really focusing on my wellness was really important. Or I think we have kind of these waxing and waning periods of, really feeling confident in our training versus really feeling insecure. And those really affect how we receive feedback and how teachable we are. And so kind of just taking inventory on the place that we are at can be really helpful to making sure that we gain the most out of our education, and working with the mentors we have in place to kind of address those things can be really useful. Okay, so we don't often obviously have a time here to chat or take questions, but I'd really love to hear anybody's thoughts about this or any other experiences that they would have. This is my email here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk here. And then these are my sources as well.
My name is Alvarez, and I'm an APD at Stanford. I also serve as the co-chair of the Physician Wellness Forum at the Stanford WellMD. Today, we're going to talk about how to manage stress one breath at a time. I have no financial disclosures. I remember my first central line. It was a trauma patient. I was an intern. I remember opening the central line kits, and I had no idea what I was seeing. I was nervous. I grabbed a needle. The attending looked at me, and he didn't know me then. I was a brand new intern. My hands started shaking. I was so nervous that I dropped the central line kit on the floor. Now, it's been over a decade since the incidents, and yet I still remember that day whenever I guide medical students or intern on their very first central line placement. It's been over a decade, and since then, I've done hundreds of central lines. I've done canthotomies, crikes, thoracotomies, and many of the fun procedures that we love about emergency medicine. In all of these procedures, there's an expectation that we're supposed to be calm and collected, and we're supposed to ignore the surge of adrenaline. The reality is that our body betrays us. Just as I started shaking when I first grabbed that central line kit, I realized that we all go through this. You've all seen this as you're about to put in that IV in that agitated trauma patient, or place an IJ, or intubate your hypoxic COVID-19 patient in rapid AFib. Some call this needle epilepsy. For the seniors and attendings in the audience, I'm sure you can relate. You're teaching your intern or medical student how to place an IV or perform a lumbar puncture, and you see their hand shaking. Interns, I know you've gone through this. I confess I still do. In fact, if you're able to see my hands right now, you'll see it shake a bit as I'm warming up to give this talk. So what do we normally tell that person? Stop shaking, right? And what do you think happens? That's right. They shake even more. It's not helpful. You're not helpful. And in high stakes, high risk environment, like intubating a POI COVID patient, you're more likely going to make a mistake. This hand tremor is also seen after high stress events like being involved in a car accident. They've looked at people's handwritings and police reports and realized a big difference compared to their baseline. So how can you effectively calm yourself? Let me introduce you to a practical tip several of us use in the emergency department. It's the concept of box breathing. Here's how it works. You inhale for 4 seconds, and then you pause and hold your breath over 4 seconds. And then you exhale again over 4 seconds, and then you hold your breath again over 4 seconds. Again, it's fairly simple. You can do it as many times over. It doesn't take a lot of time, and it's clearly free. Try next time when you're getting hyperactivated during a resuscitation, or when a consultant or you're attending or your patient is stressing you out, and your immediate reaction is to, well, raise your voice, get angry, and say something you'll regret later. Also, to help with this, slow down the cadence of your speech. Soften your voice. You'll then be able to zoom out and notice things like the present moment, your heart racing, the team dynamics, the temperature in the room. I've certainly walked patients and my residents through this when we're doing high stress, high stakes critical procedures. Now, I'm not a ball sports person, but if you watch a game of basketball, you'll see them run from one side of the court to the other. Then right before they shoot that ball, what do you see? That's right, they pause. What you don't realize is that they're actually taking a deep breath as well. Without doing so, their heart rate is going so fast. Think of when you're in a treadmill. The faster you go, the higher your heart rate becomes. And at a certain point, you start having this tunnel vision. Or maybe that's just me. So next time you sense you're having this tunnel vision, slow down your breathing. This sends a signal to then slow down your heart rate. So yeah, ball sports. Just before shooting the ball sports person starts to slow down their breathing, which effectively slows down their heart rate, allowing them to focus better. Sometimes they'll even shake off their shoulders, and then they take a deep breath in, and then they shoot the ball. The Navy SEALs use a similar technique. Some call it tactical breathing. Imagine running with all the heavy equipment that they're carrying. Then as the sniper, trying to catch your breath, you have to precisely shoot at a target. Emergency medicine as a field is stressful. In fact, our level of stress is nothing compared to what our other colleagues encounter. We are experts in uncertainty. We are capable of task switching to a level that most people do not even get to encounter. And our decisions can mean life or death. So how do we manage stress effectively? I shared with you box breathing and being present. Some call it mindfulness. Let me now introduce you to the concept of polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges. I learned this from Dr. Christoph Gimler at Stanford at a course that we teach on medical student resiliency skills training. Polyvagal theory is really about self-regulation. We're using our autonomic nervous system. The important part of self-regulation is that unconscious internal stimuli affect tremendously our personal sense of threat versus safety. I love this diagram by Dr. Gimler. Once we feel this threat to our safety, we either get hyperactivated, which mobilizes our fight or flight response, or the sympathetic nervous system, or the opposite, which is, as Dr. Gimler puts it, we literally freeze and hope that the storm will pass or that help will arrive. Once we're activated, we go into these common automatic behavioral responses to threats, even though some of them, if given a choice, we actually would not have wanted to do. Again, the key here is understanding which state we are in, so then we can figure out how to overcome these unconscious behavioral responses. Knowing this, we can optimize functioning at work, especially during high-stress environments such as resuscitations, and also learn to self-regulate with specific interventions such as tactical breathing that we just talked about. In other words, if you're feeling hyperactivated, you can slow down your breathing. You can practice some mindfulness exercises. If you freeze or you're hypoactivated, consider moving around, shaking your hands or your shoulders to create some movement as you're literally trying to wake yourself up. Imagine leaving one of the mega codes that you've ran in the emergency department. You're either still feeling hyperactivated because of the adrenaline rush, or you're feeling depleted and you're about to crash. It doesn't help that you're wondering if you screwed up. How do you quickly recharge? How do you deal with these emotions? Because you know there are other patients waiting for you, and they may not understand why it took you so long to see them. And so yes, knowing your activation state is helpful here. What else can you do? Here's a practical tip that incorporates mindfulness and breathing exercises that I do at work. I pick a patient in my list after a resuscitation who I think would love a sandwich. You don't have to overthink this, just pick one. It doesn't have to be avocado toast either, just because we're here in California. Just whatever's in the fridge for your patients. It could be graham crackers and the 2% milk. Now, I can easily task this to our nurse or tech, but this one's not really for the patient. This one's for me. I'm going to walk the 2 to 3 minutes it will take to grab that hospital turkey sandwich. And during that time, I tell myself that I'm about to do something kind for someone. I'm going to give them food. And here's the kicker. This patient is going to thank me, and it will feel good. So now that I've just cleared my mind, I'm able to walk into the next patient who's been waiting to talk about their foot pain for 10 years. I would have already replenished my empathy after a quick reset following that stressful resuscitation. Hey, I'm Dr. Alvarez. I am so sorry you've been waiting for so long. How can I help you today? Using simple breathing techniques like we discussed and understanding your activation state can help you manage stress more effectively. Try next time you're dealing with an angry consultant, or you're placing that arterial line that you keep on missing, or when you're about to get sucked into this heated conversation with your loved one. Breathe. Focus on the exhale. Well, there are so many things you have no control in this world. You have the ability to slow down your breathing. It's more than just simply having the choice of being a better person. It's giving yourself the space and time to be present. And you deserve that. Emergency medicine is a stressful field, and I'm honored to work alongside you. Thank you again for this opportunity. Please give me feedback about this talk on the link below, and please feel free to find me on Twitter if you have any questions. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Holly Caretta-Weyer, and today we're going to talk about negotiation. Negotiation is one of the most difficult things that we as physicians have to do. It's not something that comes naturally to the majority of us. So having been through several negotiations now, I'm going to share several things I have learned and mistakes that I and others have made that you should avoid. So the first and foremost thing that you should do when negotiating for something is try to build rapport with who you're negotiating with. Human beings like to work with people that they know, that they like, and that they trust. So rapport is critical in the negotiation process because when done correctly, it fosters trust, understanding, and communication, which is the cornerstone of a good negotiation. The best negotiators know that building rapport first helps ensure that they get what they want and that without it, they may not get what they are after. So even if it's just a brief intro call or some getting to know you small talk at the beginning of a negotiation, spending a few minutes getting to know the person you are negotiating with is extremely important to the process. The second thing is to know your value. Yes, you're probably a new grad, but that doesn't mean you don't bring value to your future employer. Truly think about the value that you bring to your next job. Is it that you are from the community in which you're interviewing for the job? You know, your deep roots and in-depth knowledge of the community and patient population there add value to your future employer? Is it that you far outpaced anyone else in your residency program in ultrasound scans? Did you create a new educational program? Are you the resident QI expert? Use the things that you did as a resident and the value that you add to your current team and meld that with your future employer's needs. Something that people often forget is to negotiate the process. Don't just assume you're both on the same page when it comes to determining when to meet, who will be present, what your agenda will be, etc. Think carefully about how you negotiate the process well in advance. You need to know who you're negotiating with in order to align your goals with theirs and create mutual wins. You need to know the conditions under which you're negotiating, which will allow you to focus your energy and be mentally prepared, which is key to being successful. Have a best alternative to a negotiated agreement ready. If a negotiation reaches an impasse, having something in your back pocket as another offer or something you'd be willing to walk away from negotiation toward if it didn't meet your minimum requirements is clutch. Know before heading in at what point you would leave the negotiation and consider your alternatives. So even if you don't have another offer waiting in the wings, have a walk away point in mind. A lot of you have heard this term best alternative to a negotiated agreement. This is something you need to have in the back of your mind that when you're negotiating, because you don't want to get stuck in a position where you're negotiating past that point. Okay, so time to head in. Power pose it out, right? Negotiating isn't adversarial. The best negotiations are collaborative. However, that doesn't mean you shouldn't have your game face on and psych yourself up beforehand. Like an athlete, you need to be in the right headspace before you walk into a negotiation. You're trying to be on the same team, but you're also there to advocate for yourself. When you're in the negotiation, listen actively. Once you start discussing substance, resist the common urge to think about what you're going to say next while your counterpart is talking. Instead, listen carefully to his or her arguments, paraphrase what you believe they said to check your understanding, acknowledge any difficult feelings like frustration behind the message. Not only are you likely to acquire valuable information by listening, but the other party may mimic your exemplary listening skills back to you when you're asking questions or negotiating for yourself. Ask good questions. You can gain more in integrative negotiation by asking tons of questions, ones that are likely to get helpful answers. So avoid asking yes or no questions and leading questions like, don't you think that's a great idea? Instead, craft neutral questions that encourage detailed responses such as, can you tell me about the challenges you're facing in your department? Really listen to the answers so you know exactly what they value most. When you know what excites them, you can tailor the conversation in a way that resonates most effectively and better anticipate their needs and potential objections to your asks. Always be honest. Many negotiators focus on strategy and some degree of calculated manipulation. I and many others believe in doing the opposite. Instead, prepare for discussing the underlying elements of what you want, why you want it, and why and how the other side would benefit from it. By being honest, you're not merely being vulnerable, you're creating a climate of value and equitable exchange with the person you're negotiating with, which they will appreciate. Search for smart trade-offs. In a distributive negotiation, parties are often stuck making concessions and demands on a single issue, such as the price. In an integrative negotiation, which you will be in with your prospective employer, you can capitalize on the presence of multiple issues to get both sides more of what they want. Specifically, try to identify issues that your counterpart cares deeply about that you actually value less. You can't care about every single thing. Then propose making a concession on that issue in exchange for a concession from him or her on an issue you value highly. So for example, maybe you care slightly less about how many shifts you work and you care more about having office space, or vice versa. Find points on which to make a trade. Be aware of anchoring bias. Just as this happens clinically, it can happen in negotiation. Research shows that the first number mentioned in a negotiation, or the first point mentioned, however arbitrary, exerts a powerful influence on the negotiation that follows. You can avoid being the victim of this by making the first offer and trying to anchor talks in your preferred direction. If they anchor first, keep your aspirations and your best alternative to negotiated agreement at the forefront of your mind, pausing to revisit them as needed. Again, don't forget to listen, but you also need to remember that you need to consider the things that you set forth in your mind as important before you walked in. Present multiple equivalent offers simultaneously. So this can be a useful negotiating strategy if you find that you're not really getting where you hope to go. Rather than making one offer at a time, consider presenting several offers at once to give them options. Just like children love options, adults do too. Ask them which one that they like best and why. Then work on your own to improve the offer, or try to brainstorm with the other party an option that pleases you both. This strategy of presenting multiple offers simultaneously decreases the odds of an impasse and can promote more creative solutions. Don't lose sight of the big picture. So during negotiations, it's important to understand the big picture. Be curious and gain an understanding of the other person's perspective and what they are trying to achieve. The information gained can be used to have meaningful communication among the involved parties and shape the negotiation process to your advantage by generating creative solutions that meet the interests of all parties involved. When you know the big picture, you can align your goals with theirs. What is it that you discovered they need, or what are their current priorities? How do your goals align with what it is that they need? For example, the director you're negotiating with reveals that they need someone to work on informatics for the department. You have an interest in health system science or clinical operations and can integrate this need into your wheelhouse of interests. Craft a way forward that works for both of you over the short term to meet their needs and long term to meet yours. Successful negotiation is about getting everyone to feel like they've won. Negotiation outcomes are often win-win, win-lose, or lose-lose. Your goal is a win-win. First, decide on the wins that would work for you. Second, brainstorm potential wins that would appeal to the other side. Third, plan how these opposing positions could foster your win. At the negotiation, rearrange your steps. Learn the other side's desired win. Roll out your plan and work through the win-win. So, for example, you've been offered a desirable job, but you want to negotiate a lower shift count for the same salary. Make it worth your potential employer's effort by offering something of value. Framing a reasonable request for fewer shifts with the value that you will bring in the time not working those shifts, perhaps by doing research or running the department's QA initiatives, or making the attending schedule, would convey a mutual win to your prospective boss. Some of these things go without saying, but it's good to have a reminder. Keep your cool. Don't take things personally or let your emotions get in the way of a successful negotiation. While salary or rank affects you personally a ton, the offer itself is not personal. What a group is willing to pay or a department is willing to appoint you to when you start says more about how they value the job than how they value you as a person. The more objectively you can look at the offer, the more effective you'll be in negotiating. Stay flexible. It sounds counterintuitive, however, it's easy to walk into a negotiation with a firm or fixed idea of what must happen. Letting go of desired outcomes leaves you free to listen to the other party and explore possibilities. Know your boundaries, what you can and cannot do, but don't be so fixed on what you want that you can't hear or think of alternative options. Finally, don't forget your non-negotiables though. It's good to be flexible, but there may be things that you just can't stomach or are completely out of line with your goals or values. Having these in mind will help you know when to say no or shut things down and revert to your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So now you have all of the tools. Get it done. Negotiate your way into inking that contract. If you have any questions or you are looking for resources, Forbes Negotiation Series is an excellent source, and there are several great podcasts out there. Feel free to contact me. You can find me on Twitter if you have any questions at all. And once you ink that contract, don't forget to celebrate. It's a big deal. Thank you again for having me. And again, please reach out if you have any questions at all.
Hey guys, I'm David Tursa. I'm on the board of directors for California ACEP, and I was asked to answer some of these questions for advice to residents. So I think one of the best pieces of advice I got as a resident was there's always another bus, which is good advice. So in terms of jobs, especially in places that you're looking at going to, sometimes it pays off to be a little bit selective in terms of your job. We get this mentality that, oh, I'll never get this opportunity to be able to get a job at this place, even though the job's not really a great fit for me. People move in and out of emergency medicine jobs all the time.
The best pieces of advice I've gotten as a resident were, don't forget yourself, especially as it gets busy. Continue to do all the things that you enjoy. Remember to pick a topic and look it up or read up about it at the end of each day for just 10 minutes. And don't forget the human side of medicine. Spend that extra minute at the patient's bedside. It'll go a long way both for you and for them.
The best advice that I received as a resident was that if you think you should order the test, you should order the test. You'll spend a lot of time second guessing yourself as a new attending, but when it comes down to it, if you have to talk yourself out of it, you shouldn't. My version of that would be, if you're going to lose sleep thinking about it, you should definitely order the test.
The best piece of advice that I received as a resident, having trained at the Highland Emergency Medicine Program, was simply to always do the very best thing for the patient in every scenario and situation, and everything else will work itself out in the end. And so to always just stay particularly patient focused in all of your decisions, and again, let all of the other extraneous issues work themselves out as you focus on that.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gus Garmel, and I'm honored to be included as part of the Cal ACEP Virtual AdvancED 2020 conference. I've been asked to share the best advice I received as a resident, which was during my chief residency when my mentor talked to me about humble or servant leadership. I think these are principles to consider whether you're leading a resuscitation, whether you're working on committees within your hospital, or at any time with your group or the fabric of consultants and the hospital relations that you have. The opportunity to focus and use the principles of humble or servant leadership is really a fantastic strategy that I recommend.
When I was dropping out of undergraduate because I didn't know what I was doing, my uncle gave me good advice. He said, it's less important to know exactly what you want to do, more important to know what you don't want to do. So for your survival and sanity throughout residency and your career, I recommend figuring out what you don't like doing and don't do it. This shouldn't be misinterpreted as avoidance of things that are hard. Oftentimes, the hard things are the best things, residency included. So embrace type 2 fun, avoid type 3 fun if you can. I'll let you look those up. That's my best advice for avoidance of becoming a grumpy old bastard. Granted, you'll be an old bastard soon enough. It's the grumpy part you have control over. So meanwhile, while you're in the mix, set your alarm clock, put on your cape, and get down to business. Cheers.
Hi everyone, I'm Anna. I'm your soon-to-be past Cal ACEP EMRA president. And they asked me to give you a piece of advice, which is kind of funny since I'm also a resident. But I'd say for us as residents, one of the biggest things that we should think about is to always know your rights and not to be afraid to speak up for yourself, your co-residents, and your patients. We have a lot of power in what we say and the things we believe in. And when we come together, when we speak up for each other, we can really get a lot done.
The most important advice I would like to impart to you all that I wish someone had told me was the knowledge that you will make a mistake. I think I was a naive resident that assumed that once I became an attending, I would know all the things and I wouldn't make mistakes anymore, and that's simply not true. we are human, and as you know, if you ask any of your senior attendings, they all have horror stories to tell you. So just be prepared. Mistakes are high stakes in our field, and they're hard to deal with. But you should know that at some point you're going to have a bad outcome and you're going to make a mistake, and all we can do is strive to be better and learn more and do better next time for our patients. So be prepared. The work you do is important, and keep it up.
I think it's important for residents to realize that the way they learn to practice in terms of practice style and even pathology management in residency is a great way to practice, but it's not the only way to practice and not necessarily the right way. They may find in their community hospitals or in new academic centers that things are handled differently, and it's important that they're open to that. So it's important to realize that our practices modify over time based on our experience, based on our reading, based on changes in medical practice. So I just think it's important for residents to be open when they arrive at their first job to different ways of doing things.
I think the parting message that I would have for residents right now would be to be sure to pace yourself in what will hopefully be a long, healthy career in emergency medicine. This is definitely a marathon and not a sprint. And so take care of yourself, stay well, and pay attention to those most important aspects of your life outside of medicine. That will serve you well for a long career, to stay well, and will also help you be the effective, caring, and compassionate physician that I know you hope to be.
I think one thing to consider is to use people's names whenever possible. That includes patients, their family support systems, staff, nurses, techs, consultants. Any chance you have to use someone's name shows that you appreciate them and that they matter and that you're paying attention.
If I could give one piece of advice to graduating residents, I would tell you to work on building and maintaining relationships in your life. Harvard started a study in the 1930s, which is now the longest study ever done on adult development. And they're basically trying to answer one question: what is the key to your mental health, physical health, and ultimately your life satisfaction? And the answer lied in meaningful social connections. So I would tell you, put in the effort to build meaningful relationships with your patients. Put in the effort to build relationships with your nurses, techs, secretaries. Put in the effort to build relationships with your colleagues. And most importantly, put in the effort to build and maintain connections with your friends and family.
Hello, my name is Kathy Stads. I'm an emergency medicine and EMS physician. First, congratulations on graduation. I hope you all had a chance to take a deep breath and really appreciate all that time where you didn't have to go and be a resident. So, what would my recommendations be for what to do when you're starting your new position? My answer from my own experience in my first month out was slow down. You have your entire career ahead of you to be as quick as possible, but especially in those first few weeks or months as you're learning a new EMR, and you'd rather do it right than too quickly and be wrong. So that was what I experienced, and I would certainly recommend that to those just graduating. Also, try to take it in. It took a lot to get here, so good job everyone and good luck.
Tip number 1, don't overly stress about the job hunt. I think a lot of people get so stressed out about finding the perfect job straight out of residency that I often see residents almost paralyzed by fear to make the perfect choice. And then months go by and then all of a sudden they're behind in the job hunt. So remember that you don't have to find the perfect job because you don't really even know yourself yet and your style of practice. It's very common for people to start their first job and then a couple months later, a couple years later, realize that's not the best fit for me right now and to go look for something else. That is totally okay and very, very common. And also realize that your goals right now might change in a couple of years. Tip number 2, access your network. As you are trying to find a good job out of residency, you might be submitting the most beautifully written CV and letter of intent. And as good as that might be, it's not as good as a personal phone call of someone vouching for you. So think about who you know and think about who they know. That is always more powerful than even the best of CVs and cover letters. Okay, so I hope that helps. Remember that you are well trained and you can do this.
Hi, I'm Dr. Anna Yap, a third-year emergency medicine resident at UCLA Allevue, and your Cal-EMRA past president and most recent resident voting member on the Cal ACEP board. Now, more than ever, it's shown how important it is for us to be engaged in our political processes and for us to stand up with our specialty societies, speaking up for patients and physicians alike. Cal-EMRA is known to be one of the premier resident member state organizations in the nation because of the support and mentorship that we get from Cal ACEP. You have so many opportunities to be involved and to speak up as a resident, whether that be going to Cal ACEP board meetings, which are now online because of COVID, or being a part of the government relations calls, helping to shape the policy goals of Cal ACEP. If you'd like to get involved, please let Cal ACEP know. Please email me at annayapmd@gmail.com and we can get you plugged in.
Well, I learned a lot from listening to all the advice. I want to thank everyone who submitted a video. We had a lot of contributors who stepped up to send us videos. So thank you to everyone for that. Now, I heard great advice in there, but you know what I didn't hear, Xian?
What's that?
Your advice. So I'm going to put you on the spot. What advice do you want to share with residents?
I don't think I have. I wanted to share the piece of advice that was most impactful to me in residency. And I think that for me, my mentor was somebody who was at the probably tail end of his career. And he was somebody who was a person of few words and was very level-headed and brilliant. And when I was leaving, he said, Xian, in my entire career, I think that I've probably only read 6 or 8 truly practice-changing papers. And he said, and medicine's changing now. And I think medicine's moving faster than ever before. And you're going to hear all these things of people shouting that they've found the new way to do this and the new treatment and the new panacea for a certain disease. But he said, think of medicine like a boat. And he said, when everybody's beginning to run to one side to start to embrace a new treatment or medication, just stay in the middle. Just plant your feet and hold on. And he said, and wait 6 months, wait a year. And if after 6 months or a year, you look around and you see that everybody's still on that side of the boat, then go and join them. But more often than not, you'll find that almost everybody who went and ran quickly and went to go rock the boat early has more or less come back down to the middle, and you never had to move from your spot. And I think that especially these days with COVID, with everything else, I've seen it happen even in just the few years of my career that I've had. And I think about it all the time, and how when I approach new techniques and appreciate new studies and literature and things like that.
Yeah, it's striking that balance between are you an early adopter or are you a little bit more on the conservative side where you kind of wait and see how things pan out? We need people who are early adopters, otherwise no one would be in the middle. So, but that's really good advice. Who was your mentor?
It was Phil Bossart. He's in Salt Lake City.
That's good advice. I want to highlight a couple of the other things that kind of stood out to me in this track. There was so much that was great. I liked Holly's talk on negotiating. I think that's something that we don't talk enough about. And where do you go to get guidance when you're going into negotiations for your first job? I think a lot of people feel like they don't even stand from a place of confidence and power that they can negotiate. Oftentimes residents or graduating fellows even may feel like, well, who am I to ask for what I want? I'm just happy to be getting a job. But it's important to know that it's a two-way street. So you want to assess the needs of the department that you're looking to join and see how you might be able to possibly fill those needs. But you also want to see how you can kind of stand up for yourself. And it's hard to even know what to ask for. You know, what do you even ask for? So talk to people, talk to your mentors who have recently been through that. Find out, what are things that people even ask for? What are there bonus things? Are there time off or paid leave? What are the things that you can even potentially negotiate for? What can potentially be on the table? the chair of the department where I trained said that everything is negotiable. And he said, except here. But anywhere else you go, everything is always negotiable. And so I thought that was good advice. And also, I want to give a little shout out to the women who are out there listening. I'm going to make a sweeping generalization of women, so I apologize, but also I don't. Women tend to not negotiate, not ask for what they want as much as men do. And so just for the women who are out there who are listening, you can negotiate and you can ask for what you want, and you should. You have earned the right. You've gone through the training and you are valuable. Everyone is, but just a little extra shout out for the women, because I think sometimes we need that little extra push. Xian, are there any other pieces of advice or things that stood out to you in the talks that we heard so far?
I think to just kind of echo on your statement, Jess, I think that for all of the residents who are going to be graduating, who are getting jobs, you don't understand how valuable you are. It's such a big transition to go from a state where you're applying for medical schools and then residencies and then jobs. But as soon as you get there, I feel like the tables completely turn, and it's just really hard to appreciate just how valuable you are, and being able to ask and being able to honestly openly discuss with your own faculty and mentors, with your peers, hey, what do you think is fair? Hey, do you think this is okay? And that little bit of information really helps you be able to kind of get a better grasp and kind of appreciation for all of the work that you've put into this over the last decade.
I want to mention, if you don't mind me mentioning one more thing that I heard during the talks, the talk about managing stress. So there were some cool techniques in there, and we all have different ways of coping or not coping with the stress we experience on shift. But one thing that was mentioned that I thought was kind of cool was this turkey sandwich technique, where you sort of step away after some stressful resuscitation and you think, what's one patient in the department that I can bring a sandwich to? And then you just do that one nice thing for someone, bring them the sandwich, and they thank you for it. And it's doing something nice for someone, but also sort of replenishing your own empathy. And I thought that was really cool to hear, because I've always thought of the turkey sandwich as when I get asked for a turkey sandwich or a cup of water, I feel like they're just asking me that because they think I'm the nurse, right? I'm a woman and they're just asking me that. And so a lot of the time, if I have time to do it, great. But a lot of the time I think like, oh, there we go again. They think I'm their nurse and not their doctor. And so I liked this piece of advice because I feel like I can now reclaim the turkey sandwich, right? It's not about how I'm perceived. It's about me doing something nice for someone else and also getting a little bit of that empathy replenishment back in return. So I thought that was kind of cool. So Xian, thank you so much for putting this amazing track together. And thank you to all of our speakers. I learned a lot. What we're going to do next is we are going to take a little bit of a break, and people can get some lunch, have a rest. And when we come back, we're going to be focusing on the medical students. So residents, thank you for joining us. Don't go just yet, though, because we are going to take a minute to first thank one of our sponsors who helped make this conference possible and free for you. And then a very special treat. We have 2 bands, residency bands, who sent in videos. You're going to hear some music videos from the Gravely Disabled at UCLA and the Frequent Flyers, which is our resident band here at UCSF Fresno. So a quick word from our sponsor, and then our bands will take us through the break. We will resume at 12:15. Okay, it's a short break, so please be back here at 12:15 for the start of the medical student track.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rich Isaacs, CEO and Executive Director of the Permanente Medical Group, as well as a practicing head and neck oncologic and skull-based surgeon here in Northern California. TPMG is the largest and one of the most prestigious medical groups in the nation. We are a physician-led organization that has a well-deserved reputation for being a leader in disease prevention, early intervention, and world-class medical treatment. Over the past 70 years, physicians in this organization have demonstrated what is truly possible in the delivery of healthcare. We've had a tremendous legacy that started with the focus on prevention, and we pride ourselves on the highest clinical outcomes. Every day, we engage and inspire our physicians to deliver exceptional care at every touch point. We are excited for you to learn about the rewards of being a career physician in TPMG, and I encourage you to join us if you want to define the future of medicine.